So hi everyone, welcome back. In the previous video, we discussed few things regarding the Vue basics. One was data interpolation, and we did the data binding with the help of these double curly braces. After that, we have understood how we can bind the attributes in the HTML tag and then templates using vbind, and it was one-way binding and then we understood the conditional renderings where we saw vif, velsif and velse directives. And also we saw that if someone clicks on a particular button or someone wants to even trigger some functions which are written using the v-on, and that's all we have done. And we have seen various examples, as you can see in this particular file, and we are manipulating just only app.vue. So there was some, when we started our project, there was some dummy code which was there in app.vue. We have removed that, and since this is an SFC file, we were having the code into the three formats where we have script tag, template tag, and style tag. For now the style is empty because we are not focusing on the styling of our page. And for the templates part, we did understood various components like how we do data interpolation, then binding, attribute binding, which you can see over here that we did bind our source attribute, which is part of an image tag in HTML, and we bind it. We can bind all these attributes like width, height, alt, and all these attributes can be binded with the appropriate variables declared in the script over here. Then we see that how these vf directives, conditional DOM rendering, we can do with the help of v rule, vf, velsif, and all these things. So whatever is written after vf is sort of an JavaScript code, and it tells the Vue compiler that okay, hey, you have to treat this like an script when we are using these things. Instead of specifying these keys like equal to operations over here, we can define a function's name which returns true or false. So instead of checking all these things over here, we could have simply written a function over here in the script, like we have written other functions. Like we have written one function over here, we can use similar functions, and we can so this is not just that we have to write the expressions here itself. You can go and read the documentation on the condition of the Vue on the conditional rendering. You will get to know that what are the other ways you can use vf. But the end idea over in the previous video was to give an idea on what all exists and how you use that. So that was whatever we are covering in these basic videos is not complete. It's just to give you an idea and intuition on how and where to start exploration for your project. And we saw the difference between vshow and vif directives, and vshow does not remove the tag from the DOM. It just makes the style to hidden, so that it's the attribute that whatever the content is there in this particular tag is holding, and that is not visible to the user, but it's still the script tag is still there in the DOM. However, if we see we use vif, it completely removes the tag from the attribute. We have seen that from the inspect window last time in the previous video. And whenever someone clicks on a particular button, how the function can be invoked using v-on directives also, we saw that. And we saw that @ is a short form for v-on, and also instead of writing the complete vbind and everything, we can simply use semicolon to ensure tell the Vue compiler that okay, I'm using vbind over here. Yeah. And when I was ending that particular video, we discussed that we're gonna do a few more things in the Vue basics, and mainly it would be two-way binding, and the next would be list rendering. So we have seen conditional renderings, but we haven't seen the list rendering, so we will work with list rendering as well as two-way binding for the form elements. So let's start for today's video over here with this particular note. So let's say we have created various APIs, and it will be always our way that we want to display a lot of details which we are fetching from an API request. So when you go back, you hit an API request, you get the various data, and data generally is not just one product element, it can be a list of products as well. Just for an example, so let's create a response. Like we have a response over here, it's just an nested dictionary. It's just in order to create a symmetry over here, what we will do, instead of the entire thing, let's say that the response here is like a list, and list has few other attributes. It's basically, it has an ID, product name, and the price, and we have 3 such products. And now we want to display these products to the user, and how we can use list rendering for this. Okay, so let's start with it. I hope this whatever the code we have done previously will not hinder your understanding of the concepts. We'll start for her. So idea over here is we can use let's say that we want to display this product details as we have over here in the form of a table, and not a listed item but a table, where so what we can do, we can create a table attribute and table. We also give it the header, and the header have a table row, and we can give the headings as th, and let's give them a heading as ID, name, and price. So this is the table which we are creating. Now we have a body for our table, and in our body what we want is, we want whatever the elements are there in this particular list over here, the list which we have created for the response. We need to display this everything to the user, right? So, and how do we go about doing this? So if you remember from your Mad1 project, when you were handling with the Ginger, there was this directive that you can use for. Similarly, we have this directive which is v4. So let's say that I'm using a tr tag which would be used to display the rows into the table, and we can say v4. We are using v4 is equals to, and I'm iterating over the product. Let's say that we are iterating over the product, and product in response, and then we can say td, and let's, since inside the, when we are iterating over this, now this is an object in the JavaScript, as we are writing the code in the JavaScript, so we can access these properties of ID, name, and prices using just the dot symbol. So that's what I'm doing over here. So what I need to display over here for the this should be ID, so product dot ID, and similarly we can do it for name as well as the price. So we have so now I've just written one tr tag, but since we are using v4, it will iterate over all the responses which are there in this object in the list over here, and it will iterate over it, and it will display all the products. So let's see how it is visible in our. So we'll go, and first we need to navigate back to the folder where we have our code. So we'll navigate to the front end, and then we will run npm run dev to run our server. And yes, it is starting. It will take some time. Yeah, waiting for the URL to get, and we click, and yes. So now as you can see over here that the product got iterated over everything in this tr tag. Here we go and look in the inspect window over here. Let's say that we'll go to the go to the elements. This is the, let me increase the size so that it's clear for our eyes. And this is the table which we just created over here. You can see, so we have the t body, and these tr tags got repeated for the number of times which we were displaying the products, as you can see over here. Yes, I hope this part is understood to everyone. And let's create a button over here. And now this is usually for the v4, which is list rendering. But there is always, it is always advisable that whenever we are using v4, we also specify a key that is we bind it to a key which is responsible for ensuring that when DOM is getting re-rendered, and when this list changes and the DOM get re-rendered, it doesn't misbehave. But for that reason we specify a unique key to each of these TR tags. So, and that can be done using product. So we have the product dot its id. So for our items over here, as you can see, we have an id, and every time now we'll be passing a key to it to ensure that every TR tag which gets rendered into the DOM, it has a unique ID, and if some attribute of some property changes for a particular attribute, Vue knows that okay, I have to change this particular field. So that's the reason why we are using a key over here, and it is advisable that we use key all the time. Yeah. Whenever we are using v4, we also bind it with the key. So now do we see any changes in the DOM if we specify the let's go and refresh. Yep, we don't see any changes as per in the view over here, but if we go to the table, do we see changes in the body? We can verify it using this thing. We don't see any major changes. It's just that you can see we don't get any major changes. It's the same thing which is being displayed previously with the help. But the only thing is, now if some changes happens, since we have not declared it as a reactive for now, so that's the thing. But let's say that this particular response which we had was a reactive. I'm talking about if we would have declared this particular response with the help of ref as well, so then what happens? So I hope this part is clear, how we are doing list rendering. And there are many ways, there are other nuances which are there for the list rendering. You can go and visit the documentation and read about various examples which they have shown. But just to give an idea, this is the part which I wanted to discuss. Now, next part which I want you to do, which I want you guys to do with is two-way binding. And for that, let's create a form element. So we'll create a form. And let's create a label. This would be for the name, product name. We can define the input. For now it's suggesting some things, but apart from the basic HTML, I want to remove the code. And we don't need the name, we need the name, and we need the price. Yes. And we have defined if we go save the file and go to the form over here, we refresh it, you can see over there that we got two elements. And if we hide something, let's go to the, we have view activated. I want to see the view. We will go to the view over here and see what all variables have been defined till now. You see the response is not ref, which is not reactive over here, and the other things are there. And these how do I access whatever I'm typing something over here? How do I get all this? So, all right. So what I wanted to do over here is, so we have entered some name over here, and how do I let my app or my view over here know that? So whatever input is being entered into these input box, I need to bind it to some of the variables in the view. So how do I do that? And that's the binding which I'm talking about. So what we can do is, let's in the script tag over here, we'll create an let's create an product let's create product du cities product credentials is equal, so we'll declare it as a ref, and then we can create as a null attribute, and we can give some name, and which is empty for now, and also we can give the price. So basically what I want to do over here is, so I've declared a variable over here which is an object, and I want to bind the product name to this particular attribute over here, and similarly the product price to this particular point over here. So how do I do that? How do I do this binding? So for the input box which we have, they have given us something called as V model, which is, you know, need to tell, okay, I'm trying to make a two-way binding over here. So if some changes happen in the input box, then it is displayed into the variable, and if we change the variable, then it is displayed into the input box. So that's why we are calling it as a two-way binding, and for the two-way binding we are using V model. So let's assign it as in so we have defined product credentials dot name, and similarly so the price which we have over here, which is a number, and we can define it as in V model. V model is let's say we are pointing it to product credentials dot price. Yes, and let's save the file and see what is there in our view over here, and the price. So let's refresh the page, and it got rendered, and as you can see over here we have a product credentials, which is one of the variables which we have declared, and if we go and look at here, we have name and the price, which is empty for now. So let's say that I'm entering a name over here. Let's say product name is fruits, which I'm entering, and you can see over here that as in when I just finished typing for the name over here, the name got changed as well here in our variables. Similarly, if I enter the price over here, and the price, let's say I'm entering the price as 10, and as soon as I finished typing the price, it's reflected into our view variables. So that's why. And let's say that I want to, this was when I'm changing my input from the input boxes which I have in my application. Now if let's say that I want to change the price from over here to 100 programmatically, and this, when I'm making a changes from here, it means that somehow I'm making changes to my price programmatically in the code. And since I don't want to demonstrate and confuse you by doing it upfront, I'm making changes into my view. So it means that programmatically somehow the price has changed to 100. So what happens? Does it reflect to the user? We have done it, and let's change the price to 100, and when I just change the price to 100, it changed over here. So this is why we have a two-way binding. The price, somehow the price changes, the variable changes, it will be reflected into the input box, and if we want to change the input box, again the changes will be reflected in the variable names. So that's how we have, you know, entered the price over here. Now let's say let's also come over here, and now inside the form element we want to add these product details somehow to the list over here. Somehow when I say that I want to add a product into this particular list, somehow what I'm trying to implement is I want to make these changes into my database. How we will implement, how we will change whatever the input we are receiving in these input boxes, how do we make changes into our database? We'll see some after some videos, but for now, by adding the product details into this particular key can be considered as we are making changes into a database, because this, you can consider this particular variable is an in-memory database, because this particular variable stores all the information. Yeah, so what we'll do, so let's come over here and define a submit button. So we'll define a submit button. The type would be button, or let's say type would be submit. Yes, and we can give it as an, it should be, instead of submit, it should be button. Type would be submit, and then we can specify submit. Yes, we have a submit button over here. Let's save the file, and we got some errors. Okay, where these errors are, we'll see it. where this error is coming. Let's bring it up. Something we have done. Okay, we have not closed the tag properly. So as you can see, how do I get to know that okay, what error I have made over here? So when I was reading on this, there was some error which says that on close tags this error happened. So somehow somewhere I've ensured that I've not done the template properly. So now I have changed the this thing. So now let's save the file, and as you can see, I didn't got any errors now. So if I go over here and I have the submit button, whenever I click on the submit button, by default the action is it redirects me to different page. So let's see what happens. I want you to pay attention to this particular URL box when I click on the submit button, what actually happens and what happens to our application page over here. So let's say that I have entered a fruit name, I have entered the price as 100, and I click on submit button. The URL changed for a bit and then it was rerouted back to the home page, and this entire page got re-rendered again, which I don't want. Okay, I want to, like, whenever I just click on the submit button, basically this portion only, the portion which I have highlighted only changes. And if I want to have in this kind of an functionality which we need in our project, basically I don't want to reload the entire page and again and when there are some small minute changes are happening into my database, right? So that's the objective. And so how do we correct this? So whenever I'm clicking on submit button, default action is to reload the page. So what I will do, so this is like a click on button only. So at the rate, when we saw that when we clicking on this particular button, the page entire page gets reloaded, and when the entire page gets reloaded, that's the action which we want to prevent. So what we can do is, when we are using at the rate click, right? Click was one of the event which was happening. So when we are submitting this particular form and we want to prevent its default action, so that's the event. Submit is an event which is happening, like one which we saw in the previous video. There was a click which was happening. Similarly, when you submit this particular form, that point of time I'm telling you what you have to do. First of all, you have to prevent your default action. We have seen what the default action is. When we click on the submit button, the entire page gets reloaded, redirected to different URL which we defined over here. When, let's say that you might have seen that when we say action is the place where we used to define the endpoint, like post something somewhere we wanted to add, that we used to define the endpoint over here. Yeah, but that's not what we wanted to do here. What we want is, when you click on a submit button, I want to prevent the default action, and what should be its action, that is we are going to define. Let's say that we are defining this particular function, add product. Add product is one of the functions which I'm not defined yet, which I'm going to do. But what I'm telling over here is, whenever a submit button is being invoked, and you first of all you have to do is you have to prevent its default action, and then you execute this particular function which is add product, right? So let's go over here in the script tag now, and we're gonna write our function which is add products, right? Add product. You can call this as an function add product. And when we are trying to add the product, what basically we are calling is yes. So what do I mean by when I'm trying to add a product is, so I have a response over here. So I will say response dot push, and when I'm pushing the response, what I'm trying to push is the product credentials. So I will say product credentials, and since we have made it as a reactive element, and we will use dot value. I hope I have informed that whenever we are that's what we have not done, this reactive part. I'll explain why we are doing product cred dot value. I think we have missed this particular part in the previous video, but this is important, that whenever we are accessing these reactive elements, like the name, and yeah, we have seen that, right? In the dot value we have seen in the previous video. So if I'm adding the product credentials and I want to access the value, and that's what I'm pushing into the response over here. So that's what I mean by adding for now. Let's push the code and let's save the file. See if any errors come. Here no errors come. Let's look for the runtime errors, if there are any runtime errors. So we'll be focusing on this field over here as well as the responses which are there. So right now there are three objects, as you can see over here. So let's add the fruits and also add the price is 100, and yep, and did it got, let me refresh the page once. Product credentials, it's empty for now, so let's make it fruits. Let's make, yeah, it got changed. Let's change the price as 100. Yes, it got changed over here. Right now the response object has only 3 objects. When I click on the submit button, first of all it did send the router page and the thing didn't happen, so we have to look for what didn't work for us. So we have an add product over here, and do we have defined the function properly? Yes, we have defined that. Yes. What was the incorrect thing which I was doing over here? Yes, and so what I've done is, let me check if I've made a small mistake while I was, so submit is an attribute of the form and not the button. So that's what I think is the possible error, but let's check it. Yeah, when I click on let me check, these are being populated. The array has only 3 elements, and when I click on the submit button, the default action didn't go, and the response is not reactive for now. As you can see, the response was, this response object which we are trying to add over here is not reactive. I was talking about this, right, in the so we have made this as a reactive element, but this is not reactive for now. So even if there has been change in the response, it's not being reflected because it's not tracking the changes. So we have to make it a reactive as well. So we have made it reactive, and since this has been a ref object now, so here we have to also say response.value.push. Yeah, let's save the file and see once again what is happening for us now. We have refreshed the page. This is also now a response is also a reactive element, product credentials is also a reactive element, and now when we enter the price and this thing, it got populated correctly. When I click on the submit button, you can see that fruits and the price got also repopulated properly, and you can see now in the response object we have 4 objects now. And you see, when I click on, let's say that I'm entering fruits as some other thing, now whatever I'm typing over here, it's being binded to this particular input box, but that's not what we want. But since I just to demonstrate this particular thing, I have said that how do we click on submit button and how do we change the price. Yeah, so this particular field is being binded, and this particular field is also being binded, and it's being added into the array. But the objective here for this particular video was to understand how we can bind, how we can make a submit button. How this is not what actually we wanted, because whenever we are adding a product, we wanted to make an API call to the backend, right? That's what we want. So that's why everything is being binded. Reactivity is happening, that this particular field is binded to the product credentials. So these 2 fields are binded to this, and that's what is happening over here. Yes. So how we can prevent this is, instead of making the product credentials as a reactive element, we can make it a normal object. And so we have binded this normal object over here. Yes, let's save the file and see now what happens. Okay, right now we have refreshed the page, so let's refresh it. We'll refresh the entire DOM, and 3 objects, it's empty. Fruits, and then when we clicked on the submit button, it got added, and now our page also didn't got refreshed again and again. So I hope you have got an idea on how things are working over here, how we can do multiple bindings, how we can take the input from the form and store in some variables which we can utilize at a later stage when we are making backend API calls. Right now we have not integrated backend into our application. We are still on the basics of the Vue, how to understand it, how to write the code into the Vue, but eventually after next 2-3 more videos we will see how we can connect our front end to the backend as well. So in the next video we're gonna see an advanced topic, not completely advanced but a very basic, so you can consider basic but very important component part of the Vue, which is components in the Vue. So we're gonna discuss that in the next video.